Ebony Brandon. Today is Tuesday, it's the 28th day of February 2017. This is the SKN News Now Evening Edition. In the headlines tonight, nationally, Dr. Denzel Douglas is questioning the credibility of information disseminated by the government. And with more money and resources sunk into the police force's crime-fighting efforts in the last 2 years than at any other time, less results are being yielded. Regionally, the Guyana Court of Appeal has dismissed a case by the LGBTQ community seeking clarity on cross-dressing. And internationally, with the Trans-Pacific Partnership cancelled, rural America is now questioning their decision to vote for Donald Trump. We've got the details of these and other stories straight ahead in tonight's edition of SKN News Now. The Right Honourable Dr. Denzel Douglas is calling into question the credibility of information released to the public by the Team Unity government through its official and unofficial media outlets. According to Dr. Douglas, more and more, in the face of facts coming to light, information released by the government is proving to be unreliable and untrue, particularly with regard to the economy and crime.
How can we get a true picture of the economy when the government ministers, in particular the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, says one thing about the economy, says that there's growth in the economy unprecedented in St. Kitts and Nevis, and which is leading in the entire Caribbean region, when only recently we have been very shocked to realize that the picture that is being painted by the regional financial institutions like the Central Bank of St. Kitts and Nevis and the Caribbean Development Bank, in fact, have downgraded the growth, the GDP growth in St. Kitts and Nevis for 2016, when in fact the Prime Minister was given a totally different picture. How can we rely on information from the government pertaining to the situation of crime here in St. Kitts and Nevis, when press conference after press conference, statement by ministers after statement by ministers in our parliament, the Prime Minister, who is the Minister of National Security, continues to beat his own chest and say how well we are doing in fighting crime, when only recently there has been again a dramatic release from the police in a press conference of last week that is showing that crime in St. Kitts and Nevis has increased by some 68% in 2016 compared to what was the situation in 2015, and compared to what the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security has been saying to us week after week in his very many misleading statements.
Meanwhile, Dr. Douglas says 2 years in the Team Unity government still refuses to make adequate financial provisions to establish the office of the Leader of the Opposition. Contrary to information disseminated publicly, the Leader of the Opposition under the Labour administration did in fact receive funds for the operation of his office. However, then Opposition Leader Mark Brantley made a request for financing to cover the employment of a secretary only. This was provided through a budgetary allocation of $70,000. According to Dr. Douglas, 3 years later in 2017, he's being asked to run the entire operation of the Office of the Leader of the Opposition, including staffing, the rental of office space, equipment, and other miscellaneous requirements, on what amounts to $5,833.33 per month.
I have secured a space. I have signed a contract on behalf of the Office of the Leader of the Opposition. When I checked last week, the landlord has not yet been paid, and I am still awaiting some basic other furniture, equipment, because it's furnished to some extent. But I'm looking for some basic equipment that I expect the office would have to use if the leader of the opposition is to use the office. I do not yet have a secretary. I have sent out adequate notices. I believe that those are being considered, and I've had some conversations with people. The government has basically refused to release anyone from the government service. I've requested that over a year ago. Government has responded. It will not release anyone from the public service. I must find my own and let those persons be employed from the budget that has been allocated for the office of keep. In fact, I can tell you the amount that the government has put into the budget for 2016 and now 2017 is the same. It is $70,000, which since I was in office in 2014 was the budgeted amount only for paying a secretary. Because as I said then and I said again today, that at that time the leader of the opposition said he did not wish to have any paid office from the government. He only wanted enough money to pay a secretary to operate with him as the leader of the opposition. The Attorney General, who is the minister responsible for that office, has blatantly and bullheadedly refused to consider that $70,000, which was paid 4 years ago for the upkeep of a secretary alone, cannot pay for the upkeep of an office, meaning rented space, furniture, and other personnel to support the operations of that office.
In other news, the recently released 2016 crime statistics show that the presence of the Regional Security Service at two separate extended intervals during the year had an inconsequential impact on the reduction and detection of major crimes in the Federation. On Tuesday, 20th September 2016, Commissioner of Police Ian Quealy announced the commencement of Operation Safe Streets, a law enforcement project led by the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force in collaboration with the St. Kitts and Nevis Defence Force, Her Majesty's Customs and Excise Department, Her Majesty's Prison, and the Regional Security System. The operation was described as a combined law enforcement operation between the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force and the Regional Security System, with the aim of removing illegal firearms and ammunition, drugs, and all other instruments that can be used to commit crimes. According to Mr. Quealy, the RSS had responded to the request for assistance and had provided a contingent of officers comprising of both police and soldiers, representative from all its member state territories, to assist in the endeavor. In 2016, however, the crime statistics disseminated by the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force last Friday evening strongly suggest that Operation Safe Streets was a failure, as during the year 2016, a significant increase in major crimes was recorded, with 65% of them going undetected. On St. Kitts, there were a total of 1,444 major crimes, of which 464 were detected, making the detection rate of St. Kitts a mere 32%. Nevis showed a bit more promise, having detected 104 of the 199 major crimes committed in 2016, giving them a detection rate of 52%. Of the 26 murders that occurred in St. Kitts, only 4 were solved. On Nevis, 2 out of 6 were solved. There were 19 incidents of shooting with intent on St. Kitts. 3 of them were detected. Of that, 7 occurred on Nevis, only 1 was detected. Firearm woundings on St. Kitts totaled 5, 1 of which was detected. There were no crimes committed in this category in Nevis. St. Kitts recorded 35 incidents of attempted murder, 8 of which were detected. On Nevis, a total of 2 occurred and were detected. Meanwhile, a comparative analysis of the performance of the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force from the year 2012 through 2014 shows that the police were able to accomplish much more positive results with less compared to its accomplishments over the last 2 years with regard to crime. In October 2011, the Federation saw the formation of the Delta Squad, a group of police and army personnel strategically combined and specially trained to assist in the overall crime-fighting efforts of all law enforcement agencies in the Federation. Additional training for police came from agents from the United States Federal Bureau of Investigations, who conducted a basic homicide training course for police in 2012 and a 3-day training in active shooter and intelligence gathering analysis for supervisors in 2014. In October 2013, Drug Enforcement Agency officials conducted a 4-day training course for officers of law enforcement agencies. 27 officers were trained in a range of tactics, including firearm exercises, house clearing, and raids. The Republic of China Taiwan also donated a fleet of cars to the force in 2014. 2015 saw the Royal St. Christopher Nevis Police Force receiving a new operational strategy by which to reduce and potentially eliminate crime in the Federation. This was also commonly referred to as the 6-point plan. The force also received donations on behalf of the Republic of China Taiwan in the form of new vehicles to facilitate increased vehicular patrols. A monetary donation of $3,500 presented to then Assistant Commissioner of Police Ian Quealy, and another check for $315,000, which is equivalent to 850,000 EC dollars, which was presented to Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, by Taiwanese Ambassador His Excellency George Cho. There are currently police officers being trained in Taiwan in preparation to upgrade and utilize the soon-to-be implemented closed-circuit television system in Basse-Terre as another method by which to curb crime. The Taiwanese government has also signed a bilateral agreement with police, pledging millions in funding for the upgrade of the CCTV system. The pending upgrades come at a cost of 5 million EC dollars. A new microscope, the Olympus SZX-16, was also acquired for the forensic unit of the force to assist in ballistics analysis in crimes involving firearms. Also provided to the force is the largest budgetary allocation ever in the country's history, as testified by Prime Minister and Minister of National Security Dr. Timothy Harris, of 63 million EC dollars in 2016, only exceeded by the 2017 amount of $71.7 million. Police visibility also increased in 2016, confirming a police high command commitment to ensure greater foot and vehicular patrols. The force also received advisory assistance from the Bramshall Police Advisors in England and additional support from the Federal Bureau of Investigations. On September 20th last year, Operation Safe Streets was announced by Commissioner of Police Ian Quealy and was conducted over the period of a month with the assistance of the RSS, who also provided law enforcement assistance during the carnival season later that year in December. On February 1st this year, Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris announced the pending utilization of aerial drone surveillance and the addition of another mobile patrol unit, all of which will be donated once again by the Republic of China Taiwan at a cost of over 1 million EC dollars. Despite the extensive assistance provided to the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force in the form of equipment, funds and training, the crime statistics show that the Federation's crime rate has ballooned dramatically over the past 2 years, with the counts in several categories of major crimes surpassing the counts recorded for 2012, 2013 and 2014, when former Commissioner of Police Dr. C.G. Walwyn was at the helm of the police force. Finally, this evening, the Nevis Reformation Party's Honorable Roberto Hector has scoffed at Deputy Premier Honorable Mark Brantley's recent claims concerning the job market on Nevis. Speaking with another media house recently, Minister Brantley reported that as of the end of 2016, 5,590 persons were formally employed on the sister island, the highest reported figure in 12 years on Nevis based on Social Security statistics. In response, Mr. Hector remarked that perhaps Minister Brantley's figures are PEP figures resulting from the placement of persons on the recently dismantled People's Employment Program. Contradicting Mr. Brantley, Hector says that the Concerned Citizens Movement has failed to create meaningful employment.
If you hire a man to cut the grass, and then what he does, he pile it up in a spot close to Four Seasons, and then you hire another man to move that grass and take it somewhere else where you have all the grass being collected, and then you hire another man to move that same grass over to the landfill, you are not creating any meaningful employment. And at the end of the day, to say that the figures are up, you are truly wasting time as a government policy maker.
Still to come this evening in regional developments, Barbados' former Prime Minister Owen Arthur is set to head the country's Economic Advisory Committee. Stay with us. SKN News Now continues in just a moment. The Society Against Sexual Orientation Discrimination in Guyana has lost again in its 7-year court battle to clarify the issue of cross-dressing primarily by transgender individuals. On Monday, the Guyana Court of Appeal dismissed an appeal by members of the LGBTQ community seeking clarification on a ruling made by former Chief Justice Ian Chang on cross-dressing. The panel upheld the decision of then Chief Justice Ian Chang, which said that the cross-dressing in Guyana was legal unless it was done for an improper purpose. There was no clarification on what constitutes an improper purpose. In a unanimous decision, the court ruled that it is not for a court of law to define what the Parliament has not. The Summary Jurisdiction Act, which criminalized men and women presenting themselves in attire of the opposite sex, came into effect in 1893. Jevon Vickery has more.
The appeal was dismissed unanimously by High Court Judge Brasington Reynolds, retired Acting Chancellor Carl Singh, and Acting Chief Justice Janet Cummings Edwards. On Monday, the transgender community and other organizations expressed their disappointment in the court's ruling, which leaves court magistrates to decide on the improper use of cross-dressing. Attorney-at-law Arif Bulkan told the media that there is no clarification as to what constitutes improper purpose of cross-dressing.
The court said that since Parliament didn't give any detail, they found it shouldn't be for a court to describe what is an improper purpose. So yes, indeed, there's no further clarification of what an improper purpose is. The only example that the court gave was that if a man were to dress as you heard, if a man were to dress as a woman to rob somebody, then that would be an improper purpose. You may recall, if you were present during the arguments, that we had suggested that if you did rob someone, that would be the substantive offense of robbery or theft. But the court's view is that those kinds of situations would be an improper purpose.
The attorney said that while he is disappointed with the ruling, more than likely the case could end up in the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ. Meanwhile, founder of SASA, Joel Simpson, claimed the city magistrate has warned a transgender about their female attire in his courtroom. Simpson further stated that based on information he received, the magistrate dealt with the matter in camera.
The trial started and he took evidence from her. It continues on Thursday, March 2nd. And on at least 2 occasions he told her, she reports, that when she comes on March 2nd, she must dress like a man. Dress like a man. Because today she did present herself, as you saw her in court today, in female attire.
The case was filed in February 2010 following the widely reported arrests and convictions of 7 trans persons for the 1893 law of cross-dressing in public way or public place for an improper purpose.
Former Barbadian Prime Minister Owen Arthur will head the government's new economic advisory team. This is the word making rounds in Barbados. On Monday, Finance Minister Chris Nicola addressed the establishment of the Economic Advisory Committee and condemnation of the Barbados Central Bank's policy of printing money to solve the island's economic issues. Frenella Wedderburn has more.
Former Prime Minister Owen Arthur will lead government's economic advisory team after all. Prime Minister Frandel Stewart has finally been convinced that Arthur is the right person for the job in these difficult economic times. Arthur, the former Barbados Labour Party leader, now independent member of Parliament for St. Peter, would not comment on the pending appointment. And during a news conference yesterday, Finance Minister Chris Sinclair neither confirmed nor denied the report. When asked by Barbados Today about the selection, Sinclair would only say that a reformed National Council of Economic Advisors made up of experienced Barbadians was being established.
I will also take this opportunity to inform that I am in the process of assembling a team of key experienced Barbadians to constitute a reformed National Council of Economic Advisors to assist government with the development of a national fiscal sustainability and growth plan, which I hope to be ready for national discussion and implementation before the end of summer. The persons I have invited to serve have all resoundingly responded in the affirmative and in the national interest, and I expect to be able to share those names with you very shortly. I believe Barbadians will be generally happy with the persons who have come forward to assist.
The minister also addressed the contentious issue of the printing of money by the central bank. He says immediate steps are being taken to steadily reduce the practice over the next year.
So we've set ourselves the target of ensuring that we could at least bring that down consistent with a reduction in the deficit by at least 1/3 over the next year or so, and then we move it down from there into a more sustainable position. Of course, if we can reduce our deficit at a much faster rate, which is what we're going to be seeking to do, and I believe when the returns on fiscal 2016-17 and what we're projecting for 17-18 come out in the estimates in a couple of weeks' time, you will see that there is going to be a fairly substantial movement downward of that deficit.
The Grenada Red Cross is joining the fight against the Zika virus, which has affected hundreds of Grenadians in the past year. The organization will launch its Zika project next week in communities across the country. More in this report.
32 communities are to benefit from the Caribbean Disaster Prevention and Risk Control Project. Project coordinator at the Grenada Red Cross, Cindy Lewis, says the project's main aim is to raise awareness to reduce the spread of the Zika virus.
So the objective of the project is basically, it's a community-based awareness program. So we'll be working basically within the community. Most of the work that we'll be doing would be in the community. We have 32 communities have been selected for this project, and the communities were basically selected based on statistics and information that we gained from the Ministry of Health. The communities either had confirmed cases of persons with Zika, or they had a 10% index of the Aedes aegypti mosquitoes.
Lewis says they have partnered with local stakeholders, including the National Disaster Management Agency.
We have what we call a steering committee, so we have a number of stakeholders on board. We have the Ministry of Health, we have NADMA, we have Ministry of Education, and Ministry of Youth. So we have a number of stakeholders on board.
People in the communities are encouraged to participate in the project, which involves cleanups to reduce the mosquito population.
We are basically using the persons within the community to work along with this project because it's their community. So we would use them to map the areas for cleanup. We'd be doing a lot of cleanup and awareness within the communities. And we always welcome volunteers, so whoever wishes to volunteer on the project, they can do so.
The project is funded by the International Federation and will be launched on Wednesday, the 1st of March.
Coming up in the international segment of the news this evening, the head of the Samsung Group, Lee Jae-young, has been charged with bribery and embezzlement. We've got the details coming up next. Rural America helped Donald Trump win the U.S. presidential election in part because of his promise to protect U.S. farmers. But since taking office, Trump has scrapped the Trans-Pacific Partnership that was expected to expand agricultural exports by $4 billion a year. He's also threatened to revamp the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Some people fear the president could make it harder to sell on a global stage at a time when they desperately need new customers. Diane Estabrook reports.
DeKalb County is in the heart of Illinois corn country. 90% of the land here is used for agriculture. Like many of his neighbors, fifth-generation farmer Jamie Welrett voted for President Donald Trump because of his business experience and promises to roll back environmental regulations.
Some of the Clean Water Act and some of the things that were coming down the pipe that way that we've been seeing certainly affects us from a cost standpoint and makes part of our lives more difficult.
Rural America helped sweep President Trump into the White House on his vows to lower regulatory hurdles and cut taxes. That struck a chord in this part of the country, where many farmers are seeing their incomes shrivel because of weakening demand for food and an oversupply of grain.
But since taking office, President Trump has hit a sour note with farmers when it comes to trade. He scrapped the Trans-Pacific Partnership that was expected to expand agricultural exports by about $4.5 billion a year. Now he's talking about revamping the North American Free Trade Agreement.
U.S. agricultural exports to Mexico and Canada have increased fivefold to nearly $40 billion a year since NAFTA was passed nearly 23 years ago. The trading pact has also helped make Mexico the largest buyer of U.S. pork. Hog farmer Robert Johnson says if the president makes it more expensive for Mexico to buy from him, it will buy from farmers in other countries instead.
This is really a world economy, and we're part of that world economy. We're not going back to the 20s where we put up trade barriers to the whole world and just try to take care of ourselves.
The president has yet to say how he would change NAFTA or what trade deals he might seek with other nations. But both Welrett and Johnson worry anything that makes it harder for U.S. farmers to compete in a global marketplace could make it harder for them to hold on to their farms for another generation.
South Korean prosecutors have charged the head of the Samsung Group with bribery and embezzlement. Lee Jae-yong, who was arrested earlier this month, will now stand trial for allegedly paying $36 million to businesses backed by President Park Geun-hye's friend Choi Soon-sil. Harry Fawcett reports from Seoul.
12 days after Jae-wai Lee, South Korea's most powerful business figure, was taken into detention, he faces the prospect of many months in a cell, awaiting trial for bribery, embezzlement and perjury. On the last day of their sprawling investigation into South Korea's presidential scandal, special prosecutors named Lee among 17 people to be newly indicted. The prosecutor's spokesman said Lee, along with 4 other senior executives, would be indicted on charges including bribery, aggravated economic crime, embezzlement, hiding money in properties abroad, and concealment of criminal proceeds. Lee and his fellow executives are accused of approving payments of $36 million to foundations and companies linked to Choi Soon-sil to win government backing for a crucial merger. Choi, a longtime friend of the president, is currently on trial for bribery, coercion and abuse of power. Samsung Electronics says it made the payments but calls accusations of bribery, quote, groundless. And it's announced the disbanding of its Future Strategy Office, which, combined with complex cross-shareholdings, has allowed the founding family to control the giant conglomerate, or chaebol. It says Samsung affiliates will now run autonomously. Until now, their power has been strictly limited.
Those kind of limitations are not imposed by the legal or corporate law kind of thing. It is imposed by the kind of unofficial cultural thing called the chaebol.
This all matters so much here because Samsung matters so much to the national economy. Its electronics division accounts for about 20% of South Korea's exports. In the past, Jae-wai Lee's father was granted a presidential pardon after being convicted of a financial crime in the national interest. Even though impeached, the current president, Park Geun-hye, continues to enjoy immunity from prosecution. Special prosecutors instead booked her as a suspect, detailing her conversations with Jae-wai Lee. If her impeachment is confirmed by the Constitutional Court, due to rule within the next 2 weeks, she too could be charged.
The arrest of a prominent opposition leader in Kyrgyzstan has prompted hundreds of people to protest against what they call a government clampdown on opposition figures. Critics are accusing the Kyrgyz president of undermining his rivals ahead of a crucial vote in November.
Anger building up on the streets of Bishkek, the Kyrgyz capital. Protesters are demanding the immediate release of the opposition leader. Umurbek Tekebayev, an outspoken critic of the government, was arrested on charges of fraud and corruption.
He was detained when the plane landed at Bishkek. He has heart problems. Today, doctors say his situation is stable. I hope everything will be okay. President Atambayev will be responsible if something happens to my husband while in custody.
Tekebayev's supporters accuse the government of trying to discredit their leader. Kyrgyzstan will hold presidential elections in November, and Tekebayev is widely seen as the main contender. Although incumbent President Almazbek Atambayev cannot run for a new term, he's introduced constitutional changes that confer huge powers on the Prime Minister. The opposition says the president is planning to switch to the post of Prime Minister.
I came here to express my concerns over the state of lawlessness, which is happening now in Kyrgyzstan. We didn't inherit democracy from the West. Democracy runs in blood.
Behind these fences lies the headquarters of the GKNB, the feared security service where Tekebayev is held. Human rights activists are worried about the sweeping powers of the country's security agencies.
We want reforms of state security services. There is no transparency at the agency. We have no idea about the people detained by the police, including Tekebayev.
But the president remains defiant. His government has opened criminal cases against prominent opposition figures, which many describe as a desperate move to stifle dissent in the country.
And that wraps up the international developments. Now for a recap of our headlines this evening. Nationally, Dr. Denzel Douglas is questioning the credibility of information disseminated by the government, and with more money and resources sunk into the St. Kitts Nevis Police Force's crime-fighting efforts in the last 2 years than at any other point in the country's history, less results are being yielded. Regionally, the Guyana Court of Appeal has dismissed a case by the LGBTQ community seeking clarity on cross-dressing. And internationally, with the Trans-Pacific Partnership cancelled, rural America is now questioning their decision to vote for Donald Trump. Stay with us. Still to come this evening, Sports Zone. Tonight in Sports Zone, the Windward Island Volcanoes will take on the Trinidad and Tobago Red Force next week in Grenada. We've got the details coming up next. Welcome back. The Windward Islands Volcanoes will take on the Trinidad and Tobago Red Force in a 4-day tournament starting in Grenada next week, Friday. And according to the Grenada Cricket Association President Dwayne Gill, once the weather holds, the tournament promises to be very exciting.
So it's going to be the Windwards Volcanoes versus Trinidad and Tobago Red Force. So we're back to white clothes and red ball cricket. This promises to be 4 exciting days of cricket. The Trinidad and Tobago team normally would do very well in white ball cricket. They have been struggling a bit in the red ball version. So they come here from the 10th to the 13th. It's a 4-day match. Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday against the Windwards Volcanoes, who are actually improving this season. Hoping for good weather, 4 very good days of cricket. They charge very minimal, $10 each day, and that money actually goes back into the development of cricket and cricketers in Grenada. So we want to see everyone here. I'm told that the Trinidad and Tobago team is expecting the Trinidadians residing in Grenada to be here as well. So we don't want a situation where we have more Trinidadians at the stadium than Grenadians. So it's going to be a pretty good match, and both teams are trying to get on in terms of the point standing.
Durban may be unable to host the 2022 Commonwealth Games because of financial constraints. This is the word from South Africa's sports minister. In a conversation with Reuters, Fikile Mbalula is quoted as saying, "We gave it our best shot, but we can't go beyond. If the country says we don't have the money, we can't." He said a final decision would be made by the Commonwealth Games Federation. Durban was awarded the Games in 2015 after being the only city to make a confirmed bid. In December, South African officials had said that the country was fully committed to hosting the event. The government had estimated the Games could generate up to $1.5 billion in economic benefit. The Commonwealth Games Federation said it was in the final stages of reviewing a submission by Durban and would make a recommendation as soon as the evaluation is complete. The possible withdrawal of Durban has sparked interest in the British city Liverpool, with a spokesperson for the city council confirming that Liverpool is interested in hosting the Games in 2022 and has expressed this willingness to the government. The Games were first staged in 1930 and are held every 4 years. They feature athletes from more than 50 countries, mostly former British colonies. The 2022 event is due to be the first time the Games are hosted in Africa. And finally, this evening, Pakistan's Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is expected to decide whether or not this year's Super League cricket final can be held in Lahore. Fears over security are high because of a series of recent attacks in the city. Lahore was also the site of a 2009 gun attack targeting the Sri Lanka cricket team, which killed at least 6 policemen and 2 civilians. Earlier in February, a suicide bomb attack killed at least 14 people in the city, the capital of the Punjab province. Rishad Mahmood, sports editor at Pakistan's Dawn newspaper, updated in the national media this morning on the latest in this unfolding story.
Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif will decide in the next 24 hours whether or not this year's Pakistan Super League final can be held in Lahore. That's despite a series of terror attacks that have hit the city in the past month. Well, up until now, all the PSL games have been held in the United Arab Emirates. On Sunday in Dubai, the Karachi Kings claimed the final playoff spot with this dramatic 6-wicket win over Islamabad United. Karachi's West Indian star Chris Gayle here smashing 44 of just 17 balls as his side reached their required target with a ball to spare. The playoffs begin on Tuesday to decide Sunday's finalists, and even if the game proceeds in Lahore, it's unlikely foreign stars like Kieran Pollard and Ravi Rapara will take part. Well, Lahore, you may remember, was the site of a 2009 gun attack on the Sri Lankan cricket team, which left 6 policemen dead and 2 civilians dead as well. Well, more recently, there was a suicide bomb attack in the city on the 13th of this month that killed 14 people. We can now talk to Rishad Mahmood. He's a cricket writer from Pakistan's Dawn newspaper. Has a final decision been made as to where the final will be held? I mean, I understand you've been talking to the Pakistan Cricket Board.
I have been talking to them. I've been talking to them continuously, but no decision has been made as yet. And The last time I spoke to them was that the Prime Minister is still in negotiations with the security agencies, and he is seeking a clearance from them before he can issue an order to host the final.
Well, if holding the PSL final in Lahore is a way of showing the world that it's safe for major international teams to tour Pakistan again, don't the extraordinary security measures that will undoubtedly have to be put in place ahead of Sunday's game contradict that view?
Security will be really top-notch, and it will be like the head of states get. But you see, the thing is that there's still no assurance that the final will be held, because there are many ifs and buts, because it just does not involve the two sides playing inside the arena, because there's of course thousands of people are supposed to attend it, and they'll be queuing up outside the stadiums. There are team securities and carrying them back and forth from hotels. So there are several aspects involved. So all that has to be looked at.
Yeah, it's also the fact that it's unlikely that any of the foreign stars that we're looking at the moment will make the trip to Lahore because of security concerns. Do you think that devalues the final?
Yeah, that'll definitely add value, but so far the reports are a bit of 50-50 reports, because some of the top foreign stars like Chris Gayle and Kevin Peterson and Ian Morgan, they've expressed their reservations, and they've been advised by their respective foreign offices not to travel at this juncture to Pakistan because of this new wave of terrorism that has come in the last week. So still lots of ifs and buts there. But I feel that it is also a matter of perception, because, I mean, we've hosted Zimbabwe in the past, and quite successfully. No untoward incident happened then. But I think in this particular case, this recent wave of terrorism has added another angle to this, because, I mean, the final, just prior to the last week, it was quite safe. It was considered a very ideal circumstances for hosting it. But now, in view of the recent terrorism, it's become a bit dicey.
And that wraps things up for us here at the SKN News Now News Desk. On behalf of the entire team, and Kareem Martin, who engineered for us this evening, Leslie Joseph, who's our reporter on the outside, I'm Ebony Brandon, wishing you a very pleasant evening. Take care. And to remember, coming up next, the rebroadcasts of today's edition of Ask the Leader.